Beautiful Taurus, welcome back. I'm Henry, and I'm so glad you're here. This reading may not resonate with everyone, and that's perfectly okay. Take what feels right for your journey and leave behind anything that doesn't. As I was preparing for your reading, one message kept coming through very strongly. Someone is beginning to see your value in a way they couldn't before. Whether this is someone from your past or someone quietly reflecting on your connection, there is a growing awareness here that feels difficult to ignore. Let's take a closer look and see where this energy wants to take us today. Okay, Taurus, the moment I began shuffling your cards, I couldn't shake this feeling that someone has been spending far more time thinking about you than you realize. Not just casually thinking about you. I'm talking about the kind of thoughts that show up when everything gets quiet. The kind that appear unexpectedly while driving home, sitting alone with a cup of coffee, or staring out a window when nobody else is around. The first card that catches my attention here is the Six of Cups card. And honestly, the energy feels very nostalgic. Someone keeps returning to memories connected to you, not because they're trying to. It almost feels automatic. Like their mind keeps pulling them back toward moments they thought they had already moved beyond. You know how certain memories seem small when they're happening, but years later they suddenly feel important? That's what I'm picking up here. This person is replaying conversations, the way you laughed, the way you listened, the way you made space for people without demanding attention for yourself. They're remembering details they didn't fully appreciate at the time. And that's what's interesting. Because I don't think this realization happened overnight. I think it happened slowly. Little by little, memory by memory. The more distance they created, the more they started noticing what was missing. It's almost like they kept expecting to replace the feeling they had around you. Except nothing quite compared. Nothing carried the same sense of ease. Nothing felt as genuine, and now they're beginning to question why. As I continue looking at these cards, the Empress card appears and the atmosphere shifts immediately. There's something about the way this person sees you now that feels very different from the way they saw you before. Before, they may have admired you. They may have enjoyed being around you. But now they're beginning to recognize your value. Not your value because of what you do for them. Not your value because of how much attention you give them. Your value as a person. Your presence, your energy, your character, the things that cannot be copied. Honestly, Taurus, I keep hearing this phrase in my head. I didn't realize how rare you were. And that's exactly what this feels like, because sometimes people become so accustomed to having access to someone that they stop noticing how special that person truly is. Then life creates distance, then silence arrives, then perspective begins doing its work. And suddenly, everything looks different. This person is looking at you now through a completely different lens. They're noticing how stable you were during difficult moments, how patient you were when they were confused, how genuine your intentions were. They're starting to see things they missed before. And some of these realizations are making them emotional, not because you're demanding anything from them, but because they're becoming aware of their own blind spots. Okay, there's something else happening here. This person has been trying to keep these feelings organized and controlled. Very controlled. They don't want to appear vulnerable. They don't want to admit how much space you've occupied in their thoughts. But the energy feels like a dam beginning to crack. Little truths keep slipping through. Little realizations keep surfacing. And every time they try to dismiss those feelings, something reminds them of you again. A song, a location, a scent, a random memory. It's like life keeps bringing your energy back into their awareness. Then we have the Judgment card showing itself. And wow, this is where things become really interesting. Because this card feels less about you changing and more about them waking up. They're beginning to see their own choices differently. They're revisiting old decisions, old conversations, old moments where they could have said something and didn't. Moments where they could have moved closer but stepped back instead. And now they're looking at those situations with fresh eyes. Not because somebody forced them to. Not because somebody convinced them. Because something inside them is shifting. Honestly, this feels like one of those periods where a person suddenly understands something that was right in front of them all along. And once they see it, they can't unsee it. The awareness remains. The questions remain. The emotions remain. I also get the sense that this person is comparing the version of you they once believed existed with the person they now recognize. And the difference is significant because before, they may have viewed you through assumptions, through fear, through their own emotional limitations. Now they're beginning to see the real you, the person who remained consistent, the person who carried themselves with quiet strength, the person who offered sincerity in a world where sincerity can sometimes feel difficult to find. And the more they acknowledge that truth, the harder it becomes to ignore how much you impacted them. You know, I don't think this person expected you to stay with them emotionally for this long. I think they assumed time would eventually erase the connection, that life would simply move forward, that memories would fade. Yet here they are, still thinking, still remembering, still trying to understand why your energy continues to feel so present. And as I sit with these cards, I can't help but feel that this is only the beginning of what they're starting to realize. Because the Six of Cups card is still lingering here. The Empress card is still holding space. The Judgment card is still unfolding, which tells me there may be more truths surfacing beneath the surface than even this person fully understands right now. And the deeper they look, the harder it becomes to pretend that nothing has changed. Because once someone starts seeing clearly, they also have to face the things they were avoiding. That's what I'm noticing now as I continue pulling cards. The atmosphere becomes quieter, more reflective, less focused on the connection itself, and more focused on what has been happening inside this person's heart for a very long time. The Hermit card appears. And honestly, this doesn't feel like someone who's hiding from you. It feels like someone who's finally unable to hide from themselves. You know, there are moments in life when distractions stop working. The busy schedule stops working. The excuses stop working. The pretending stops working. Eventually, a person is left alone with their own thoughts. And that's exactly where this energy feels like it is. This person has been spending a lot of time looking inward, more than anyone around them probably realizes. They may still appear normal on the surface. They may still go to work, talk to people, handle responsibilities, smile when they're expected to smile. Yet underneath all of that, there's a deep examination happening. Questions they've avoided for years are suddenly demanding answers. Why did they pull away when something felt genuine? Why did vulnerability feel so uncomfortable? Why did they convince themselves they had more time than they actually did? Okay, those questions are becoming difficult to ignore, because the more they sit with their own thoughts, the more they begin connecting certain patterns. This person is starting to realize that some of their reactions had very little to do with you, and a lot to do with wounds they carried long before you ever entered their life. Honestly, I feel sadness around that realization. Not self-pity, not victimhood, just sadness. The kind that comes when somebody finally understands how much their unresolved pain has influenced their choices. The Five of Cups card is sitting here now. And wow, there's regret attached to this. A very human kind of regret. Not because they were intentionally trying to hurt anyone. Not because they woke up every day planning to create distance. It's more complicated than that. This feels like somebody who kept believing they would figure everything out later. Somebody who thought they could postpone difficult conversations, postpone emotional honesty, postpone commitment, postpone vulnerability, until eventually they looked around and realized later had quietly become now. And suddenly certain opportunities didn't feel as guaranteed as they once assumed. I keep seeing someone replaying specific moments, not dramatic moments, small moments, moments they barely noticed when they were happening, a conversation, a look, something you said, something they should have said. It's strange because those memories seem to carry more weight today than they did back then. Almost like life has been highlighting them, showing them details they overlooked, showing them what was actually being offered, what was actually standing in front of them. There's something else here too. I don't think this person learned how to trust emotional safety very easily. For some people, closeness feels natural. For others, closeness feels dangerous because somewhere in their story, trust became connected with disappointment. Love became connected with loss. Opening up became connected with pain. And when that happens, people create defenses. Not because they're cold, because they're scared. Because protection becomes a habit, a survival mechanism, a language they've spoken for so long they don't even realize they're speaking it anymore. The difficult part is that those same walls that protect someone from pain can also keep them away from genuine connection. And I feel like this person is beginning to see that. They're recognizing how many times fear was disguised as logic, how many times hesitation was disguised as caution, how many times avoidance was disguised as independence. That's a heavy realization, because once you see it, you can't really go back to not seeing it. The Six of Swords card starts appearing in the energy now, and I have to tell you, this feels different than simply moving on. This feels like somebody attempting to move through something, to move beyond an old version of themselves, to leave behind ways of thinking that no longer fit who they're becoming. The process isn't happening overnight. Actually, it feels messy. There are moments of clarity, then moments of doubt, moments of confidence, then moments of fear. Yet the direction feels important. Because for the first time in a long time, they're no longer running from the deeper issue. They're looking directly at it. They're acknowledging it. They're sitting with it. And part of that process keeps bringing them back to thoughts of you. Not because you're responsible for fixing them. Not because they're expecting you to heal everything. That's not what this feels like. It feels more like your presence became a mirror. A mirror that reflected things they weren't ready to see before. The way you showed up. The consistency you offered. The honesty you carried. All of it highlighted the places where they still had work to do. And now that awareness keeps growing. Okay. This is interesting. Because I'm getting the feeling that they're also beginning to understand why losing your presence affected them so deeply. At first, they may have blamed circumstances, timing, distance, life, other responsibilities. Yet the deeper they go into this reflection, the more personal it becomes. The more they recognize their own role in what happened. And honestly, that's not an easy place to sit. Especially when somebody starts realizing they may have pushed away something valuable because they weren't ready to receive it. The sadness isn't only about what happened. It's about understanding what could have been different if certain fears hadn't been making the decisions. You know, sometimes growth arrives through joy. Sometimes it arrives through discomfort. This feels much closer to the second one, because every card here suggests someone standing face to face with truths they've postponed for a very long time. The Hermit card remains present. The Five of Cups card remains present. The Six of Swords card remains present. Almost like this person is walking through a quiet corridor between who they were and who they're becoming. And as they continue that journey, another realization feels like it's beginning to surface just beneath the surface of their awareness. Something feels different in the energy now. Not lighter, not necessarily easier, just clearer. Almost like somebody has finally reached a point where they can no longer blame circumstances for everything that's happened. They're beginning to understand the difference between what truly nourished them and what simply distracted them. The Devil card shows up here, and honestly, this feels less about another person and more about a pattern, a cycle, a habit. Something that kept repeating itself over and over again until it started feeling normal. You know how sometimes people stay connected to situations they've already outgrown? Not because they're happy there, not because it feels good, because it's familiar, because uncertainty feels scarier than discomfort. That's what this energy reminds me of. This person spent a long time convincing themselves that certain relationships, obligations, or environments were simply part of their life, something they had to tolerate, something they had to carry, something they had to work around. Yet the more they're reflecting lately, the more they're realizing how much those situations were draining them, how much energy was being spent surviving rather than actually living. Honestly, I keep feeling like this person has been caught between two completely different emotional worlds. One world feels heavy, complicated, demanding. There's always another problem, another argument, another expectation, another reason they can't fully relax. Then there's the energy connected to you. The contrast is becoming impossible for them to ignore, because whenever your presence enters their thoughts, something softens. The noise becomes quieter. The pressure eases. Their breathing almost feels different. It's strange because I don't think they understood that before. I don't think they realized how much peace they felt around you until they were no longer experiencing it regularly. Sometimes we only recognize calm after we've spent too much time inside chaos. That's exactly what keeps coming through. This person is comparing experiences now, comparing conversations, comparing emotional environments, comparing how they felt after spending time with certain people. And the results of those comparisons are creating some uncomfortable truths. The Devil card keeps lingering, not because they want to remain trapped there, because they're finally noticing the chains. For the longest time, they were looking everywhere except the place where the real issue existed. They thought another relationship would fix it. Another opportunity would fix it. Another distraction would fix it. Another excuse would fix it. Nothing really changed because the deeper lesson remained untouched. Now they're looking directly at it. And that's where everything starts becoming uncomfortable. Because awareness changes things. Once you become aware of what isn't healthy, pretending becomes exhausting. Once you become aware of what drains your spirit, continuing to participate feels different. Once you become aware of who genuinely brings peace into your life, it's difficult to keep settling for less. Justice appears, and wow, this energy feels incredibly important. Not dramatic, not loud, important. There's a sense of somebody reviewing their life with a level of honesty they haven't used before. Not the kind of honesty people show others. The kind they show themselves. They're weighing decisions, looking at consequences, recognizing patterns, acknowledging mistakes. Some of those realizations are hard to swallow because it means admitting that certain choices led them further away from what they actually wanted. It means accepting responsibility. And honestly, responsibility is something this person has avoided at times. Not because they're a bad person, because accountability can be painful when it forces you to confront regret. I keep seeing somebody lying awake after everyone else has gone to sleep, thinking, reviewing, connecting dots, remembering conversations they once dismissed, remembering things you said that suddenly make perfect sense. It's almost like your words are returning to them at exactly the right moment, not as criticism, not as punishment, as clarity, as understanding. The more clarity arrives, the harder it becomes for them to keep telling themselves the old story. The old story no longer fits. The excuses no longer fit. The narrative they've been using to justify certain situations no longer fits. Something deeper wants the truth now. Real truth. The kind that asks difficult questions. The kind that requires difficult answers. Then we have the Tower card entering the reading. And honestly, I don't feel destruction here the way people often expect. What I feel is awakening. A realization arriving so powerfully that it changes the way someone sees everything around them. You know those moments when you suddenly understand something you've been missing for years? And once you see it, the entire picture changes? That's the sensation I'm getting. A perspective shift, a collapse of illusion, the removal of emotional blind spots. This person is beginning to recognize that some things they fought so hard to hold on to may never have been serving them. And some things they neglected may have been far more valuable than they understood. That's a painful realization, because growth often asks us to admit we were wrong about something, wrong about people, wrong about priorities, wrong about what truly matters. The interesting thing is that every time these realizations appear, your energy seems to be standing quietly in the background, not demanding attention, not forcing itself into the story, simply existing as a point of comparison, as a reminder, as evidence that another way of living is possible, a calmer way, a healthier way, a more honest way. This person is beginning to understand that peace isn't boring, stability isn't weakness, consistency isn't something to overlook. For a long time, they may have chased intensity, confusion, emotional highs and lows, situations that felt exciting because they were unpredictable. Now they're starting to wonder whether what they truly wanted all along was something completely different, something real, something steady, something safe enough for them to finally put down their defenses. There's still resistance here. I don't want to pretend otherwise. Change doesn't happen all at once, especially when somebody is leaving behind patterns they've carried for years. Yet the energy feels like it's moving, slowly, deliberately, almost as if life is guiding them toward one realization after another. And with every layer that's being stripped away, another truth seems to be waiting underneath, preparing to reveal itself when they're finally ready to look at it. A restless energy starts building here. Not chaotic, not impulsive. More like the feeling someone gets when they've carried a conversation inside their head for so long that keeping silent is becoming harder than speaking. The Eight of Wands card immediately catches my attention. And honestly, it feels like thoughts are moving faster than this person expected. For a while, they were able to stay occupied with everything else. Responsibilities, work, daily distractions, the usual noise of life. Yet something has shifted, because now every road seems to lead back to the same question. What do they do about you? You know, there comes a point where reflection stops being enough. A person can analyze their feelings for months. They can replay memories. They can revisit regrets. They can understand exactly where they went wrong. Yet eventually another question appears. What happens now? That's where this person feels stuck. Not because they don't care. Actually, I think they care more than they're comfortable admitting. The problem is that awareness creates responsibility. Once they acknowledge how much this connection means to them, they can't pretend it doesn't matter anymore. That's what I keep seeing somebody rehearsing conversations. Practicing words, imagining possible outcomes, trying to predict how you might respond. Honestly, it's kind of sweet, because beneath all the overthinking, there's vulnerability. Real vulnerability. The kind that doesn't come naturally to this person. I feel like they keep picking up their phone and putting it back down. Thinking about reaching out, then questioning themselves, thinking about sending a message, then deciding maybe they should wait, then changing their mind again. It's almost exhausting. Not because they don't know what they feel, because they care about getting it right. The more important something becomes, the more intimidating it can feel, especially when there are emotions involved, especially when there are risks involved, especially when somebody knows they may need to address things that were left unfinished. The Judgment card is appearing again. And wow, this feels very personal, very internal. This person is standing at a crossroads emotionally. Part of them wants to stay where it's familiar, where nothing changes, where they don't have to expose their heart. Another part of them knows they can't keep pretending they're unaffected. The realization keeps returning. The awareness keeps returning. Your presence keeps returning. Every path of reflection somehow circles back to the same place. To you, to the connection, to everything they didn't fully understand before. There's something really interesting happening here. The energy doesn't feel desperate. It doesn't feel obsessive. It feels sincere, which is very different. Because sincerity requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. I think this person is slowly gathering that courage. Not all at once, piece by piece. One realization at a time, one difficult truth at a time, one moment of self-awareness at a time. The Knight of Cups card enters the reading now, and immediately the atmosphere softens. The defensive energy starts fading. The walls don't feel quite as tall. The distance doesn't feel quite as necessary. This person is beginning to connect with emotions they've spent a long time managing from a safe distance. You know what keeps coming through? Tenderness. That's the word. Tenderness, because when they think about you, the energy shifts away from fear and towards something much gentler. They remember how they felt around you, how easy certain conversations felt, how seen they felt, how accepted they felt, not judged, not pressured, accepted. And honestly, I don't think they fully appreciated that when they had it. Life has a strange way of revealing value through absence. Sometimes we understand the importance of something most clearly after we've had time away from it. That's exactly what this feels like. The distance created perspective. The silence created perspective. The separation created perspective. Now they're seeing things differently. Not because you've changed who you are, because they've changed how they're looking at you. I also keep sensing that this person wants to explain themselves. Not justify, explain. There's a difference. Justification tries to erase responsibility. Explanation tries to create understanding. This person seems far more interested in understanding these days. Understanding themselves. Understanding you. Understanding what happened. Understanding why certain choices felt right at the time but feel different now. That's why communication feels so important in this energy. Not perfect communication. Not scripted communication. Honest communication. The kind where somebody finally says what they've been holding back. The kind where someone admits they don't have all the answers. The kind where vulnerability becomes more important than pride. Honestly, pride has played a bigger role here than this person probably realizes. Not arrogance, protection. The kind of pride that says, if I don't say anything, I can't be rejected. The kind of pride that says, if I stay silent, I stay safe. The problem is that safety and fulfillment don't always live in the same place. This person is beginning to understand that. The Eight of Wands card keeps pushing the energy forward, not aggressively, naturally, like a river finding its direction. Momentum is building inside them. Questions are becoming answers. Confusion is becoming clarity. Avoidance is becoming intention. And with every passing day, the idea of doing nothing feels less comfortable. The idea of remaining silent feels heavier. The idea of allowing this connection to remain unfinished feels harder to accept. What fascinates me most is that they're not only thinking about what they want to say, they're thinking about what they hope to hear, whether there's still space for conversation, whether there's still room for understanding, whether the door is truly closed or only partially shut. Those thoughts seem to occupy a lot of their emotional energy lately. The Knight of Cups card remains present. The Judgment card remains present. The Eight of Wands card remains present. Almost like three different parts of this person's heart are finally beginning to move in the same direction. Not rushing, not forcing. Simply arriving at a point where standing still no longer feels like the answer. And the closer they get to that realization, the more another important choice seems to be waiting just beyond the horizon. Quietly asking them what they're willing to do once the opportunity to speak finally arrives. A quieter kind of confidence is beginning to emerge from all of this. Not the confidence that comes from certainty. Not the confidence that comes from having every answer. The kind that appears when someone finally stops fighting what their heart has been trying to tell them. The energy feels noticeably different here. Less focused on the past. Less focused on mistakes. More focused on possibility. More focused on what could actually be built if fear wasn't sitting in the driver's seat anymore. The Ace of Cups card arrives first, and honestly, the atmosphere softens immediately. There's something beautiful about this energy because it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel forced. It feels genuine, like somebody is rediscovering their capacity to feel deeply without immediately running from those feelings. You know, for a long time, this person seems to have approached emotions as something that needed to be controlled, managed, contained, analyzed. Now they're beginning to understand that Not everything meaningful can be solved like a problem. Some things have to be felt. Some things have to be experienced. Some things have to be trusted enough to unfold naturally. That's what keeps standing out to me. This person isn't simply thinking about you anymore. They're imagining what life would feel like if they allowed themselves to fully embrace what they've been resisting. And that's a very different place to be emotionally, because imagining a conversation is one thing. Imagining a future is something else entirely. The Ace of Cups card feels like a doorway opening inside them. Not a dramatic doorway, not a fantasy. A willingness to consider possibilities they once dismissed. A willingness to believe that something meaningful can still grow when honesty is present. Honestly, I don't think this person expected their feelings to evolve this much. At first, it may have been curiosity, then reflection, then regret. Now it's becoming intention. And intention changes everything, because intentions ask questions. What kind of life do I actually want? Who do I want beside me? What truly matters when all the distractions are stripped away? The Empress card appears again. And wow, your energy feels incredibly strong here. Not loud, not demanding, strong. There's a difference. This person keeps seeing you as someone who remains grounded regardless of what's happening around you. Someone who knows their value without needing constant validation. Someone who carries warmth without losing themselves. And honestly, that quality feels increasingly important to them, especially after everything they've been sorting through internally. The more they reflect on different experiences, different people, different chapters of their life, the more they recognize how rare emotional stability actually is. They've spent enough time around confusion to appreciate clarity. They've spent enough time around inconsistency to appreciate reliability. They've spent enough time chasing temporary excitement to understand the value of something that can actually last. That's why this energy feels more mature, less impulsive, less reactive, more intentional. I keep seeing someone sitting quietly and imagining simple things, not grand gestures, not dramatic declarations, simple things, sharing a meal, talking at the end of a long day, laughing about something insignificant, having someone who genuinely understands them nearby. It's interesting because those visions seem to matter more than any fantasy they've entertained before. The Strength card enters the reading, and this is where the emotional growth becomes impossible to ignore, because courage isn't showing up here as fearlessness. It's showing up as honesty, the willingness to move forward despite uncertainty, the willingness to acknowledge feelings without immediately trying to suppress them, the willingness to choose vulnerability even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. Honestly, this person still has fears. I don't want to pretend otherwise. They still wonder about timing. They still wonder about outcomes. They still wonder whether enough damage was done to create distance that can't easily be bridged. Those concerns haven't magically disappeared. Yet something stronger seems to be developing alongside them. A desire to stop letting fear make every important decision. A desire to stop allowing old wounds to dictate every future possibility. A desire to trust themselves more, and perhaps trust you more as well. Justice returns, which tells me this person continues thinking about balance, not just what they want, what is fair, what is honest, what is deserved. There's a lot of self-reflection happening around responsibility, around showing up differently than they have in the past, around becoming someone capable of sustaining the kind of connection they claim to want. You know, it's one thing to desire happiness. It's another thing to become ready for it. That's the distinction I keep feeling. This person isn't just longing anymore. They're learning. Learning what partnership actually requires. Learning what emotional maturity actually requires. Learning that love isn't only about feelings. It's also about choices, consistency, presence, accountability. The energy feels less like wishful thinking and more like preparation. Then the Ten of Cups appears, and honestly, the moment this card arrives, everything expands. Not in a fantasy-like way, in a meaningful way. Because this person is no longer looking at the connection through the lens of temporary emotions. They're beginning to see long-term potential. Potential for growth. Potential for trust. Potential for building something that doesn't disappear the moment challenges appear. I keep getting this image of somebody standing at the edge of a new chapter, not fully inside it yet, not completely outside it anymore. Just standing there, looking forward, thinking carefully, feeling carefully, recognizing that some opportunities don't come around every day, recognizing that certain people leave a lasting imprint for a reason. The interesting thing is that the cards aren't showing somebody who suddenly has every answer. They're showing somebody who's finally asking the right questions. Questions about commitment, questions about authenticity, questions about what kind of future actually aligns with who they are becoming. And the more those questions arise, the more one particular thought seems to return again and again. What might become possible if they finally stopped looking backward and allowed themselves to discover what this connection could look like from here? We'll leave the energy here for now. Honestly, this feels like a story that's still being written. A lot has been revealed, but it also feels like something important is still unfolding beneath the surface. Remember, Taurus, your value was never determined by whether someone could recognize it. Your value has always been there. Sometimes it simply takes people longer to see what was standing in front of them all along. Thank you for being here and sharing this space with me today. It truly means a lot. Take good care of yourself, stay grounded, stay open to whatever life is teaching you, and I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, be well.